I hope you're all having a super fantastic sparkling day. Today we are at day 2403, and we're going to be discussing, can church records really reveal... Oh, I can't talk today. It's been a problem all day. Can church records reveal belief and belonging? Church records reflect more than ceremony. They reflect community. And I tell you, churches have the best records. They would have like pre-print back in the 1800s into the 1900s, they had these pre-printed books where you just fill in the blanks. And often there'll be like little remarks written in the columns, or if it had baptismal date, they might write in the birth date as well. So they were a wealth of information. And so let's look to see what some of these records are. You got baptism and christening records reveal identity. On that, you get the parents' names, you get the father's name and his occupation. You get the mother's name, and quite often her maiden name is there. Instead, on some church records, it will just have her first name listed. In some church records, it has her first name and her maiden name listed, which was quite cool because now you have another clue for your tree. And they would often have on their sponsors or godparents would be listed on the baptismal records, and that often reflected with close family or trusted friends. These names reveal support systems. Religious ceremonies mark belonging within the community. Marriage records. Now, in some cases, they would have the marriage banns, which had to be read out 3 weeks, once a week for 3 weeks prior to the wedding. That these people were intending to get married. That way, if anybody had any objection to it, they had time to put it to file their objection and have it dealt with before the marriage actually took place. And so this was an intent to marry. And then, of course, 4 weeks, and that would start 4 weeks before the wedding, and on the 4th week, they would have the wedding. Marriage records reflect and shared belief systems. So marrying within specific denominations may signal cultural continuity. Interfaith marriages may suggest social change or integration. Religious ceremony choice reflects identity and values. Parish, I love parish records. They have so much information in them. Burial records reflect tradition and respect. Location of the burial and the funeral rites reveal adherence to faith practice. In some churches that have the cemetery, have the burial grounds on the church grounds, you had to be of that faith to be buried there. You had to be in good standing with the church. It was consecrated ground, so there were certain rites and rituals that allowed you to be buried there, or you had the public cemetery. So being buried on the consecrated grounds of the church was preferable to being buried in a public cemetery. Cemetery placement often reflects family grouping. Burial records preserve reverence and ritual. And I would tell you this, going through public ceremony, I love to walk through cemeteries. And just to read the tombstones, I find it a very peaceful place for quiet contemplation and just wandering among the things. And you pick up little hints and tips along the way. And I know that the last time I was up in the town where I spent my high school years, we went back there for a visit, and Mum and I walked into the cemetery to go and look over the back fence that looked over the back of the property. Now, all these trees that they had planted the years ago had all grown up fully. You couldn't really see the house. And so then we went over to the area where the new burials had taken place, and we walked up and down like about 5 or 6 rows, seeing if there was anybody we knew on that list, because I'd lived there for 6 years, Mum and Dad lived there for 8, and so we walked up and down the rows, seeing if there was any names that we recognized, just catching up on who had passed since we had last been in town, basically is what we were doing. But I find them a great place. I mean, my parents just found out the other day, we're sitting talking about the times that we're living in Waitara. And I said, oh yeah, they have this nice grassy piece. It's on a slight slope there. It was over by where all the infants and the infants and toddlers were buried. And there was just this nice it was just a gentle slope, but it was enough that you could lay there on your back and look up at the stars. And I said, Linda and I and a few of our friends and stuff, we just used to lay there and just have conversations. It was kind of in the middle. Well, it wasn't really in the middle of the cemetery, but it was in the middle of the area where the parking space was, the swamp area was, the bank that went to the back of our place. And so it was a private area, and as somebody walked into that area, and we would just lay there looking up at the stars and just chit-chat like teenagers do. And it was a very quiet, peaceful place to do that. And we weren't disturbing anybody, and we weren't talking in loud voices, and that's just how we used to hang out. And my parents were like, you used to do that at the cemetery? I said, yeah. I said, it was great. You good stargazing and everything else. The skies were crystal clear, and she said, "Well, who was up there?" So I've named some of the friends that would come with us to this, including there were girls and guys in the mix, and there'd be like about maybe five, 6 or 7 of us there, and we're just all in a row on this thing and just look up at the stars. It was really cool. But I will also tell you too that if you're going into when you're doing burial records at a church, if you're going to go to any church beforehand, call ahead and book a time. Don't just show up and say, I want to see your parish records, because they've got to go looking for those records. So call ahead of time, like a few weeks before you're going to be there, so that they can pull if the parish records are there at the church or if they're held elsewhere. Doing your due diligence. If they're at the church, let them know what time you're going to be there, and ask if you can see those records. And being burials, they will tell you who's in what graves on the consecrated ground if they have the cemetery, if they have a cemetery burial ground on the church, and all of that. But I know that walking through different cemeteries, especially in the States, they will have, like the one where Brad's buried, they have, of course, they've got the military section, but they also have a first responders section, which I thought was really cool. And that was for police and firefighters and paramedics. They also had an area that was Greek Orthodox. So the Greek Orthodox had bought this whole entire plot, this big area, and it had like a chain fence across, basically saying this is Greek Orthodox, don't go on here. We went to another area, and they had some other religion. The Hebrew section, the Jewish section, and then they had all these shrines, the mausoleums and stuff that had the different families in them and that sort of stuff. So it was a pretty cool thing. And then we came across some grave sites which were very unusual. They were actually like a granite bench, and they had the families that were buried on that plot, but they had a bench there at an area where you could sit and look at the view over the cemetery, because it was up the top of a hill. And but they had written on the bench there, they had on the legs, they had the name of the people that were buried in that plot. If you're looking for people who may have had a funeral there, they will show you the funeral records, but they may not have burials on the church grounds. They could be part of a public cemetery. So check there and then go to the cemetery records and ask to see the records for whichever ancestor you're looking for, the plot and all of that. And the cemetery records will be very revealing, because it will tell you, one, who purchased the plot and when they purchased it, every time that plot was opened and why it was opened, and who's buried in there, because not everybody buried in the plot would be listed on the tombstone. So keep an eye out for that one. Membership roles reveal community integration. These regular appearance on church rolls suggest active participation. These are people who are active in the church. Removal from membership may signal a relocation or a conflict. They may have gotten kicked out of the church for some reason. Maybe they decided to go to a different religion. Maybe they converted to a different religion for their spouse. Church attendance often anchors social life. There's churches in small towns and that have a big role in their small towns, where they are in the community all the time, and they often put on different fairs and activities and events and stuff for the community. So keep an eye out for those. Denomination choices reflect cultural heritage. Certain denominations align strongly with specific ethnic groups. A shift in denomination may indicate assimilation or migration. Faith affiliation often mirrors cultural identity. And why does all this matter? Because church records illuminate where ancestors felt they belonged. And that was the big thing. If you'd been uprooted from your country and moved to another country, being able to find your cultural center with your religion there and being able to participate there made you feel like you belonged and that you hadn't been exiled. And your practical takeaway for today is examine sponsors, burial locations, and denominational patterns for deeper context. And if you want help interpreting church records, send us a private message and let's set up a 30-minute, no obligation, free discovery call to help get you on the right path. And in closing, faith communities often held families together across generations. And with that, on some parish records, just as an FYI, if you want to know how long certain people have been in an area, if you find a baptismal record, see if you can find the baptismal record or the marriage records for the parents who maybe belong to that same church. They could have been in that parish for generations, and the church will have them all recorded in there: births, deaths, marriages, baptisms, christenings, they will all be in their church records. So don't just stop at when you find your ancestor. Remember, look above and below, and also ask if that name appears anywhere else in the register, because it could be another relative in there. It could be another generation in there. And now you've got the key. Now you've got clues to who the next person up is in the level 3. You might find your second great grandparents in there. Have a look and see if your third great grandparents are there. You never know. You never know. Anyway, with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening. And we will be back tomorrow evening around 6 p.m. Pacific. We've got Zanakin Studios weekly podcast at 5 p.m. Pacific. 5 p.m. Pacific, we have Zanakin Studios podcast, weekly podcast. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about AI and, what's tomorrow? Actually, what is tomorrow's one? Hang on, I got to get the right topic on this. Got it here. Short form video creation with AI. So if you want to know about short form video creation with AI, tune in tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Pacific on youtube.com/the@Zanakin Studio, and join us there. And otherwise, we will see you back here at 6 p.m. Pacific tomorrow evening.